there. This is Chris Dunn coming to you from the Event Marketers Toolbox. We've got a couple of great guests here with us today. I've got a new co-host that's helping us out today. So I want to kick it over to Dana Esposito, who's also on the Blue Hive team.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dana Esposito. I've been in the exhibit industry almost 30 years now on both the creative side and the corporate strategy side. And we have a great guest today, Ed Marsh. Ed Marsh, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, congratulations on your new role, Dana. I know Chris has got this podcast built up momentum, and so you're stepping in at a good time.
I was voluntold. I was voluntold.
So what I do is work with B2B companies, mostly industrial manufacturers, on revenue growth, everything from board governance and strategy through marketing and sales and customer success and technology that weaves it together. And the essence of my work is really that we can engineer processes with a continuous improvement mindset across all of revenue growth, just like companies do in their manufacturing and operations on the back end of the business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This is going to be a great conversation. Just to expand a little bit on the Event Marketers Toolbox, we are here. We are coming to you, everybody in and around the events marketplace and industry, and we're doing our best to deliver really interesting conversations with people from really all over the event kind of landscape, as it were. Ed and I actually go back quite a ways. Back in the 90s, when I was selling portable and modular exhibits, he happened to come into the showroom that I was working at, and I must have done something right. I made an impression, and we recently, within the last couple of years, kind of reconnected, and we've had some great conversations. I've actually been on Ed's podcast, which was great. We met up at one of the manufacturing shows that my company supports, IMTS. That was back in the fall. And as soon as we kind of got the podcast going here, you start thinking about like who can I reach out to that's going to provide some value. And Ed's name came right to top of mind. So we are excited to be jumping into that. But before we start our conversation, I just want to kind of circle back on our sponsors. So Blue Hive is obviously my employee as well as Dana's. We are a full-service custom exhibit house. We are located both East Coast and West Coast. So all three of us right now are outside of the Boston area. This is where our headquarters are. This is where the company was born 20 years ago. We are very creative, and we bring a lot of firepower to projects. We have in excess of 100 people within the organization, and I think we're size-wise, we're not the 1,000-pound gorillas. And we're not the mom and pops. We're a really good size, and we can go upstream and downstream to help people in a lot of different ways. We also have a fairly new location out in Vegas. We've been there for a couple of years, so we can source a lot of support out of that Vegas location for everything West Coast, really everything west of the Mississippi. So thanks to Blue Hive for sponsoring us. And secondarily, there is an agency that we use to produce this podcast, as well as help us with our LinkedIn. It's called Fist Bump. Fist Bump is a great group. God's honest truth, this podcast was something that I was kicking around for several months, almost a year or so. I could not get it off of the ground with myself. And just by myself, I lacked the skill and the time and so forth. Luckily started partnering with Fist Bump on several things, and they help us bring this show to market, and they also help us produce all the content that's related to it. So it's not just a podcast, it is a media, really kind of a channel, which becomes a marketing channel for us. So having said that, we want to kick it back and have some great conversation. Dana, I think you've got a question that we want to get started with for Ed.
And before we get started picking Ed's brain on all things in our world, I just wanted to thank Ed for his service. He is a veteran. He was in the Army, and I just want to thank you for that. So Ed, setting the stage, what is the real cost of underpreparing for events?
Well, I think we got to back up. And who owns a trade show? Is it marketing or is it sales? And why are we doing that show? I think many people go to a show assuming it's lead gen. And maybe that is the primary goal. Maybe it's a secondary goal. Is it to visit with existing customers? Is it to avoid having people talk about us if we're not there? Is it to break into a new industry? Is it to, to basically, we have a booth in order to buy the opportunity to get the list, or to have our SMEs speak at the conference that happens in parallel with the show? There's a lot of different reasons we can be there. And I think that the cost of unpreparing is, we're much more likely to fail to achieve our ROI if we don't clearly define what the ROI is. And once we've defined it, then we got to have KPIs. It's like anything else in business. And we need to be able to make business decisions. If we're there to get leads and to close deals with, my world, I mostly work on long sales cycle, big ticket, complex sales, where often companies will have teams of people that will come to a show. They've got a project in mind and they want to evaluate several vendors all at once. We need to be prepared for that. We need to understand what our KPIs are, how many leads, how many deals we want to close, how we define a qualified lead. If we exceed the number, what does that tell us? How do we handle the show differently next year? If we miss the number, what do we do next? Who owns that number? And what do we invest? What flexibility do we have to increase investment as the event draws closer and we're not getting the traction we expected? Can we invest more in order to make sure that we're hitting that KPI? All of that then, I think, determines how we're going to build out the booth, the kinds of interactions we want, how we prepare, how we rehearse with our salespeople, what marketing is investing in, and how we create the experience. Chris talks a lot in the podcast that he joined me for. He spoke a lot about creating experiences. I think part of that is thinking about how we want to engage prospects, for instance, with their mobile device, with a QR code to a landing page. So we're setting a cookie on their device. We're getting an email to them right away. We're building a relationship. I think that all of it comes back to understanding upfront why we're doing the show so that we don't make a mistake on the investment and not get an ROI out of it.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I thought of something. So there are some clients. So I'm like half creative, half strategy. So I love data. I love data and metrics and KPIs and all the things, right? What would you tell a client? So like some of our clients go to a show and they have very specific goals. Like it's a certain number of sales or a certain number of leads, like that type of thing, where it's almost an easier to measure thing, right? It's quantifiable. For us, like when we even go to our own show, which we just came back from Exhibitor Live out in San Antonio, which was one of my favorite shows, and we're actually exhibiting there as an exhibitor. It's a little bit different for us, right? Because we're one of those clients that are trickier. And what I mean is, I guess my question is, what would you say to a client where it's not as easy to measure, like how many leads at that show? Because in our world, we're the type of client, even for ourselves, and we have clients like this, where it is a long relationship situation, right? Like we may meet people at a show, but it doesn't mean they become our client right away. These are very long-term relationships. And we have clients who are the same way. Like how do they set those goals and gauge if the show is a success, if they can't have like immediate data to point to prove it post-show?
So I'd answer that two different ways. First of all, I mean, we could talk about marketing attribution. We could talk about the fact that maybe your KPI, if you've got a super long sales cycle, isn't the deals you close within the next quarter, but maybe it's the new accounts that you're speaking to, or the number of additional contacts and different buying roles that you're able to connect with in an account, or the number of target accounts that you're able to schedule meetings in advance with in your booth. Some of those kinds of things that work toward, I mean, they're clear precursors toward the revenue in a long, complex sales cycle. The other thing I'd say is, how are we going to differentiate ourselves? I mean, in your case, nobody goes to an events trade show or walking around and says, oh my goodness, I never thought of a trade show booth. You have to be speaking to them in some way about their business outcomes, their business problems, the disappointment they had with their last event, their hopes and aspirations for how they can engage people differently, something that speaks to a business issue. And that needs to be, I think, the emphasis of the way you plan for and participate in that event, so that it then supports those KPIs, whether they're immediate short-term revenue or, longer-term business development sort of KPIs.
Ed, I'm glad you kind of backed us up and kind of called us out on that, because oftentimes we have to do the same type of thing, right? You start jumping into a discovery call with a client and it's immediately, here's what we're thinking. We want a meeting room. We want demo stations. We want this and that. And it's like, we got to hold on, time out, right? Back it up. tell us a little bit about why we're even going. So we're guilty, right? Cobbler's kids.
We all are.
Sometimes we want to jump. We jump right to the end.
Right.
And we always try to ask our clients too, like what hasn't worked in the past that you've already done, like what you don't like. Not everyone knows what they do like, but everyone knows what they don't like.
Yes, absolutely. The CEO hates purple. No purple.
No purple.
As a for instance, I love purple. I think purple's great. All right, cool. That was a nice little start for us. So, all right, I'm jumping in with my question here. So, kind of a pre-show sales strategy standpoint. So, what should the sales department be doing, before the booth even opens? Ed, well, kind of walk us through some of that pre-show stuff.
So, I think let me answer that differently. If you walk through a trade show as a visitor, what do you experience booth after booth after booth? People looking at you, people sitting in their booth on their laptops, people looking at their phones, or somebody who kind of wanders up to you and says, what did you come looking for? How can I help you? If we go back to the point we want to differentiate ourselves, certainly differentiation happens in the booth design process and being clear about your goals. You talk about activations and experiences, and you emphasize lighting a lot when we spoke. Those are things that can differentiate, maybe slow somebody down, create a different feeling, invite a conversation. But our salespeople need to be clear what the business challenges are that they're speaking about. If we kind of think about it from the, like a challenger sales sort of a thing, it sounds like experience tells me folks in your role are worried about A, B, and C. Did you come to work on those or something else? Let's prompt that conversation, and let's be ready to do that across the common buying roles that we know exist. I mean, maybe the business decision maker for what we're doing is a COO, but there's influencers that could be a VP of sales or an HR director or a plant engineer, depending on your industry. We need to be able to speak to the challenges they have. So that means a sales team in conjunction with marketing, because this is not one or the other. They need to be very clear about that messaging. And then sales leadership and management needs to rehearse that. There needs to be role plays. There needs to be activity to make sure that people are clear on it. We need to set the expectations for how they're going to behave. Not all night entertainment. They got to be ready to go in the morning. We need to be clear on how we're going to collect information that we need for the next conversation. Something like, red hot needs a quote. That doesn't work. I mean, that means that somebody, your colleague, is going to waste the prospect's time trying to ask them again what's going on and go through that whole process. We need to do a better job planning those conversations. So I think obviously we need to schedule appointments. We need to identify target accounts to invite. We need to make sure we're clear which of our prospects are coming, what pending opportunities are going to be there. All of those basic blocking and tackling, but much more. I think we need to prepare our sales team and rehearse them to be effective in every interaction.
I can tell you from the creative side of things, I do know that creatives really appreciate when a marketing team and a client, like they've already done a lot of that homework ahead of time. They've had those meetings to figure out like what's our goals, how we're going to be different, because when they're able to convey that to the creative who's going to be coming up with the exhibit structure solution and the interactive solution, and they can tie it all together, and that goal becomes much more magnified and has way more impact, and it tells one big story. So I love that you're saying that.
And how we're different can't be, we've got this many more pounds per square inch, or we've got this additional module of software, or, those are table stakes, and everyone sounds the same if you talk about that. I believe the way we establish difference is the way we differentiate the way that we sell and engage with people.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, from a timing standpoint, I'm super excited to be, going through this right now, because everything that we're talking about is super fresh in my mind. So I represent the sales team here at Blue Hive. Dana really, again, comes from the creative. Now, her in the creative department, 6 months or so prior to the show that we did, they start ideating on what is our story, what is our message, what do we need to address, as you mentioned, what are the problems in the marketplace, right? In this particular instance, budgetary concerns were obvious, environmental impact concerns with recycling and repurposing and so forth. So, those questions, those answers were something that Dana and the creative team really kind of noodled in the beginning, and they built a design and a story and a flow through the booth that kind of spoke to all of that stuff. And Dana, thanks to you, Ed, on a previous podcast that you were on, and you were talking about the alignment between sales and marketing, it got me thinking, and I was like, you know what, we got to have more of this, right? We brought the marketing folks, the designers and so forth into the sales meeting, and we kind of had it out, right? It's like, hey, listen, here we are, we're three weeks, we're a month out. Not only is sales reaching out and trying to set appointments and so forth ahead of time, but Dana, walk us through the vision that the creative team had. Talk to us about the story that we need to tell, and then let's all internalize it so that we can have an authentic conversation from my standpoint as a salesperson to that person who's coming in, right? In this particular case, event marketer, trade show manager, CMO, VP of sales, whatever they may be, coming in to kind of talk about that. But those were conversations we had ahead of time so that when we went into it, hopefully we were prepared, and hopefully the results that we're getting or have gotten reflected that effort that was put into that. So timely stuff.
Well, it sounds like you guys did it well. And I mean, it's important for you. Obviously, you have to model not only the right booth setup, but you have to model the right behaviors before and after the show, because your prospects are going to be watching the way you do it. And you got to do it right to have the credibility.
Mm-hmm. And the list of goals that we had set for ourselves for that particular show at Exhibitor Live, say we had 5 goals, like one goal, but like, what was the strategy? I actually added more to them to make it even more difficult. So for ourselves, because I was trying to be like, well, if our most complex client came up to us, how would we solve it? Like with intelligent, creative strategy, because we wanted to have an answer to that story when people came up and engaged in the exhibit. So it was it's always a nice exercise to go through to really put yourself in your client's shoes.
All right. So a question for you. Everyone's talking about AI. Did you have an element of your booth that talked about how AI will engage with displays? I'm just intrigued by how people are talking about AI in their different sectors and industries now.
We didn't have a section of the exhibit experience that talked about AI specifically. We had a very specific journey that was highly interactive, and it was interactive both through technology, like provoking human curiosity to compel a human to interact, because that's one of the most difficult things to do. And there were like 3 stops on that journey. So there were different types of interaction, including hands-on tactile. So there was technology, hands-on tactile, there were call to actions. So there wasn't any what I would consider AI. And on the topic of AI though, because it is a hot topic right now, like, do we use it in, say, design? I would say AI at the stage that it is right now is handy when it comes to design for brainstorming in our world, but it's not yet at the point where like it's going to say eliminate what my original job in the industry was as an exhibit designer, because it doesn't solve it in reality. It comes up with really cool ideas that are like complete fairy dust, and that's always a great brainstorming tool.
Have you seen any clients use it really well on the marketing or sales side in preparation for the show, just thinking about best practice or process or anything like that?
If they may have, I just haven't seen it. I know that I use it. I like writing, but I still oftentimes will plug things I've written into Chat GPT. And that's a handy one, because if you specifically tell, say, Chat GPT who you are and who your audience is, it's very intelligent in the way that it will recraft it. It's even interesting to see, like, oh, and if you do this really well, I'll give you a piece of pizza. Like it acts like a person, and it will task itself to like up its game in response to you. So it's extremely interesting. As a designer, I have used it to create some things I put into designs, but they weren't the exhibit.
One really cool idea that I just thought of as you're talking, there are some people that take like a series of persona interviews, create a custom GPT, load those persona interviews in, define the persona with the context of those interviews that have been put in, and then use that as an avatar for their prospect and say, okay, here's our messaging, here's our display. How do you react to it? What do we need to do differently? That might be an interesting way to
interesting.
Test the plan beforehand.
Yeah, I can tell you with the EDPA, which is a nonprofit organization within our industry, we actually mentor college students, and the college students actually create personas when they're coming up with solutions for their exhibits, and
Right.
they're doing that by hand, so to speak, right? So it's really interesting to think of feeding the AI to help generate that.
Yeah, I think an important distinction. When I spoke with Jim Krause, who's the president of the Buyer Persona Institute for my podcast, he said the ability of AI to create a good persona is limited.
Mm,
It feels easy, but it doesn't give you that good a result. On the other hand, if you build the persona the hard way,
yeah.
inform the GPT with all of that hard qualitative research, and then ask the GPT, okay, now as this prospect, tell me what your feedback is on this messaging. Tell me what your feedback is on this paper or whatever. That's an interesting way to use it.
Yeah. The more you feed into it first, you obviously definitely get a better answer. And
Right.
I've tested that both ways. So yeah, it's
Cool.
becoming very smart.
We have had some folks show up with with some AI based designs and like, hey, what do you think of this? And they're not really rooted in reality, or physics really don't apply to that.
But
But
they're
yeah,
great
like Dana said,
inspiration. Like,
it's
yeah,
good
all for
inspiration.
it.
Yeah,
You know, inspiration comes from all sorts of places. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Chris, do you want me to move on to our next section, or?
Sure. Let's hop to the next question.
All right, Ed. So the next question we have for you is all talking about sales when it's actually in action. So, like, what should actually be happening during the event?
So again, I would push back. I'd say it's not just sales, it's marketing and sales. Marketing
Mhm.
or sales, marketing and sales. We need to be thinking about it all from that perspective, because a lot of times the sales enablement content is going to be used, for instance, to help follow up on it, is a byproduct of marketing and collaboration between the two. But I would argue that if we've rehearsed well, if we understand the messaging, if we understand how people are going to have conversations, if we understand how they're going to capture comprehensive lead information, that during the event, we ought to be thinking about how we begin to take action immediately. Now, we understand that people are still at the show. They don't want to, carry armloads of brochures with them. Their emails piling up while they're out of the office. But if we wait until we get back, and then everyone takes a long weekend to catch their breath after being traveling, and then there's email to catch up on, and 2 or 3 days later we go through the list of leads and begin to assign them out, and then sales reps are busy because they've been out of the office and they finally get to that 2 or 3 days later. It's not a stretch of the imagination to understand that suddenly 2 or 3 weeks have gone by before we're actually following up. And so if we shift our thinking to how do we begin following up immediately, and maybe that's with workflows that get activated every night. Maybe it's with a simple email that includes a video from the CEO, for instance, saying, thanks for visiting. We know you're still traveling. We know you're buried. We're going to follow up in 3 days when you're back in the office. Here's the person that's going to be calling you. Here's what we understood you described your challenges being and what you wanted to work on. And you're conveying that you've paid attention. You're going to facilitate the conversation. You're going to make it happen more efficiently. So you're really starting the follow up while you're at the show. I think that's probably the most important thing that you need to do.
What
Yeah.
about to dig into that whole section a little bit more? What would you talk to us a little bit about when it comes to how to capture content, not just someone's contact information?
So you're having a conversation. There needs to be a conversation that is talking about the business problems, about the outcomes, about the symptoms, about the other things they've tried and why it's important to fix it, and what happens if they don't fix it, and all those kinds of things. And so that conversation needs to be captured. Now, perhaps in some cases, everyone's okay recording that conversation. You ask them, but say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not asking you to repeat this twice. Do you mind if I just record this? Maybe there's a certain type of conversation that's substantially more detailed that you want to do that with. But I've just seen over the years hundreds of quote unquote leads where somebody says, hot, send a quote. I mean, that's not sales. That's baloney.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the other thing during a show, you said content. So content can be the context of the conversation, the details, all that information that's going to help the sales process and avoid wasting the prospect's time. But there's another huge content opportunity. That is all of the people who are there and the conversations that are going on that could be marketing and sales material. So, I mean, I think that marketing needs to plan ahead of time to have a videographer there. They
Mm-hmm.
need to have some customers there as kind of live in-person testimonials, if you will, in the booth, being able to answer questions for prospects. If we go back to the jolt effect and the concern that people have, the fear of messing up as they go through the buying journey, let's have buyers there to take some of that concern away through those conversations, not just quotes on the wall, but the real people there to share their experiences. Hopefully we've got those kinds of buyer relationships. People in the industry are willing to spend, an hour in our booth with us. And we've got several customers that come through. We ought to be able, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We ought to be able to record conversations that are going on with customers who stop in to visit, capture testimonials with video, have our subject matter experts, when we're all together in a group there, be able to, record videos and content that can be transcribed, that can be chopped up into social pieces. It's a huge opportunity, but it only happens if we plan ahead of time. We make sure we're clear on the topics and the people and give them a chance to think about what they want to say, give them some guidance on what we expect them to say, make sure that marketing has the resources that are there, the lighting and the microphones and the cameras and portability and a plan for a space to do it and all those kinds of things, so that we actually capture all that content that's so easy. I mean, there's no other environment where we can capture so much.
I really appreciate you saying that about making sure that people plan ahead to capture so many things that are happening live on show site. Because in this day and age where viewers are so used to things like a podcast or seeing, just a little sliver of content, I just really appreciate that. And also trade shows are a large marketing span. So, put that money to good use.
Right.
Yeah. So we've got Sarah Hamlin, who's joined us here in the comments. We interviewed or had her partner and her husband, Brendan, on the pod a couple months ago, and as a video and production professional, they were banging the drum on this big time, right? So I think the one thing that I want to kind of add to that is, like, yes, go in and have a plan, but the plan isn't like, hey, Chris, you've got a phone, can you real quick run around and just get a little bit of a video, right? That's not a plan. That's a reactive, and you're never going to be able to do a good job with that. So come into it, have the plan in place, have the, like you're saying, have the lights and the cameras and the person, right, who owns that. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, you can't ask somebody to be fully present and engaged with your clients as a salesperson and also do that at the same time, right?
Not at the same time, but there needs to be accountability. Management needs to be in front of the camera themselves. They need to demonstrate that they're going to set aside the time. They're going to prepare. They're going to be willing to, nobody likes being in front of the camera. And so we have to maintain accountability from the top of the organization down to make sure that it's properly done. I'd also say that cell phone video isn't all bad. I mean, in that plan, there could well be places where the cell phone video is going to be effective, particularly, put it on a gimbal, get some B-roll, capture, industry influencers that you happen to encounter in the hallway or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to disparage, doing that. I wanted to make sure that it's not like, we're not just like at the 11th hour, like, oh, crap, we forgot to think about this. Going into our show, we had several cameras, we had a DJI that we're using, which is a small little guy that's super portable, super easy. Dana, you actually went out and bought a whole brand new camera, or a whole new phone, I should say, prior to the show. So you were
camera and a gimbal. Yeah, I was practicing with my gimbal for the first time. So they're very handy. They're not terribly expensive. I recommend anyone who's traveling for work to get one to capture.
Absolutely. So, whether you're using your own team, bringing in the pros, I think the important part is to have a plan, understand what you're there to capture. And once that event passes, like that content is gone, right? So if you don't get it, you don't get it. So have the plan for that, which is great. As a salesperson who I feel like, I've kind of rethought my role and how it works. And I think a lot of us need, have done that and need to do that in this post-pandemic era where I wouldn't say I've got one foot in marketing and one foot in sales necessarily, but I have much more of a marketing thought process on how I go to market, because you kind of have to, right? To be involved on LinkedIn and to be creating videos and putting out content and so forth. That's really a different, kind of a muscle memory kind of than we've had in the past. So,
Yeah,
we've all had to
you've
kind of
clearly
adapt.
invested heavily in your personal brand and the way you're engaging on LinkedIn and the breadth of engagements you're having. I think you're really demonstrating what that discipline and what that commitment can look like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would say probably at that show that we were at 2 weeks ago, I probably had 12 different conversations with people who were like talking about that. That was a great opener. It's like, hey man, I follow you. I really like what you're doing. That's a very easy conversation to kind of jump into versus like, let me sell you something and
Right.
slam this down your throat when you're not really interested at all. So, right. So from, across the board, you said from top down, from management standpoint, like if the sales team and the C-suite and the leaders within that company have that similar type of mentality, that we need to be putting forth a content and ideas and so forth to create a reputation. That reputation in turn drives revenue eventually.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a longer tail, but it's all part of the process, right? It's all part of that mixed.
It builds trust, which is critical to get to have
Yeah.
the discovery conversations. I mean, it's really hard to get meetings with new customers, and most companies stumble there. So if we can build trust, if we can build familiarity, if we can talk about a broad range of pre-awareness sort of topics, add value to them, then we have a much easier time picking up the phone, reaching them, and having that initial, call it a discovery meeting with them.
Right. That's
Just
a
to let
perfect
you
segue.
know,
Oh, go ahead, Diane.
my computer's doing something weird. If I disappear, just giving you heads up, I'm fine.
You're still here,
saying
luckily.
perfect segue to.
Perfect segue to kind of talk about a little bit about post show, right? So we do try to keep it, the pod between 35, 40 minutes, where we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So, from a post show discipline standpoint, where do you think most kind of sales teams fall short? I know you've talked a little bit about the lack of responsiveness, the, kicking the can 3 weeks down the road, that type of thing. Share with us some additional thoughts on that.
All right. So some people, this is going to piss a lot of people off, and some people are going to disagree, but I can tell you anecdotally and based on personal experience, I've looked in marketing automation, I've looked in the CRM, I've looked at spreadsheets from multiple companies after multiple shows, and I can tell you that typically only 30% of leads get any follow-up, and often, in most cases, that's like a single lame email. The reality is we need to have an agreed to minimum acceptable standard for follow-up. It needs to be omni-channel. Probably needs to be 12 steps. I believe that we ought to charge salespeople for leads. We know what we're paying for the event. We ought to build an account with credits and debits where they're essentially being charged for leads, and they've got the opportunity to get a credit for that if they get a meeting or if they run the complete sequence. And that sequence means email, phone, social, direct mail, sales video, maybe 3D mail. It involves a lot of things, and it's got to be a number of steps over a course of time. It has to be with properly rehearsed and thought out scripts and good email templates, and not just this vapid crap that a lot of people said, hey, you stopped by our booth. What did you want to talk about? So I think that's the bottom line, and there needs to be consequences if we don't do that. Leads need to be reassigned after a certain amount of time. We also need to be clear, going back to the goals of the show. If we're not hitting those goals, why didn't we hit it? Does that change what we do next time? Do we do this same show again? Or do we find a different show? Or do we do a hospitality suite and not the booth? Or do we scale it way back? Let's have goals. Let's work hard to hit them. And if we don't hit them, then let's make business decisions based on that, not just keep doing the same thing time after time after time if we're not getting business value out of it.
Right. And Dana, I want to parlay that set of questions to you as well, because Ed certainly hit on it. It's like we're all responsible for this follow through process, and let's put ourselves in the shoes of our attendees, right? Maybe they went to 30, 40 different booths. They had a lot of conversations, right? How do we, as the exhibitor, really stand out so that conversation is easy, right? It's like, hey, you remember us in our booth because we created this memory together, because there was the smell of a fresh baked, popcorn, or a fresh popcorn, or fresh baked cookies, or whatever that sensory engagement was that really kind of tied that memory, to that experience. So you as a designer, I know, think about that an awful lot. It's like, how do we not only create a memorable experience in the booth, but how do we create something that has those legs so that when our salespeople are following up, that conversation is easy, because it's like, here's a photo, here's a video of you and I, we were together. We did a giveaway if somebody went through our entire engagement experience and put a little bit of information, into the system, they would be entered to win this really cool hat. Right, we were down in San Antonio. It kind of had like a Western flavor. It had a little bit of a Blue Hive flavor, but people were lining up to want to win these hats, and that gave us a great talking point as a follow through as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, creatives, we tend to ask our clients a lot of questions, and that's, you want to be able to get on the phone with your creative who's going to be solving your problems, because they are going to ask some questions maybe you haven't had a chance to think of yet, or just probe a little bit. But we're always banging the drum of whatever your product is, whatever your message is, in order for us to try to help you achieve your goals with the exhibit at your event and the interactive, we try to engage as many of the senses as possible, right? Because every time a human uses another one of their senses, their brain fires additional neurons. So it goes from not just something that's happened, it's something that's going to be memorable. And if it's memorable, it means that they've learned it. So when your salespeople follow up with those potential clients, they're remembering you because they've learned something. So we really want to amplify that for clients. And that's what clients should be thinking of. And I think that's what Ed's talking about, really, like, making it more than just a name and a number, and tying that all together from the beginning of marketing to the end of marketing.
Right. And to I think both of your points, and picturing again how we've tried to structure this is having a thoughtful cadence already kind of pre-envisioned, and then tying it into maybe personal conversations that were had, so that yep. outreach doesn't just land like a lead balloon on the other side. Like, I talked to 40 people, I have no idea who you are, I'm not going to answer this. Right. Yeah, cool. Well, that's some good stuff. So we really kind of dove into kind of pre-show, during show, post-show, the need for sales and marketing to kind of be aligned, to have a plan going in. Ed, we like to, as we're wrapping up our show here, obviously we keep things as efficient and precise as possible, but we'd love to ask our guests, are there a couple or 2 or 3 takeaways that maybe you want to leave our event marketer listeners with, that are kind of must-haves for how do we move the needle in this type of a scenario?
So I would say, number one, you have to define the goals. You have to have KPIs. You have to be clear while you're there. You have to understand what success looks like and how it's going to benefit the company. What happens if we fail? What we consider a success? How we'll react in future years if we do really poorly or do really well? How we can build relationships with adjacent companies, all the other kinds of things that fits into this. And it may be different goals for different departments. For sales, it may be lead gen. For marketing, it may be creating that video content. For management, it may be partnerships with adjacent technologies, or even trying to recruit additional salespeople who you're able to speak with casually on the floor. So need to think about that, and then have a clear plan for how you react depending on how you do against the KPIs. Number 2, you really need to build the booth, what you all call the experience, and the conversations around outcomes and problems for each persona on the buying team. Not what we do, what's important to them, because that's what's going to create that meaningful and differentiating connection. And then number 3, you have to have a detailed plan for the entire life cycle, from beforehand, preparation, sales and marketing at the event, and follow up. If it's just kind of marketing gets the booth set, the pad and the carpet selected, and then everyone shows up and make sure they have dinner reservations and hotel rooms and sees how it's going to go, that's leaving a lot of money on the table.
Right. In an era when things are doing nothing but going up, right?
Right.
There's a lot of focus, a lot of microscopes, on that budget. So it's not so much, I always feel like when we're talking to our clients, it's not so much that the costs are rising, but can you get the ROI that you need to substantiate the spend, right? And if you follow a lot of these tips and strategies and plans that Ed's laying out, like, this is the way that you do it when you're a pro. And people who just kind of show up and throw up kind of thing, or don't really have the plan, they're not the ones who are going to succeed.
Right. They're missing out.
Yeah, leaving, as mentioned, leaving money on the table. So awesome. Well, I think this is a great place to kind of cap it off. Ed, how do people, now that they know that you are an expert in this area, how do people reach out, get a hold of Ed Marsh, and continue conversations and connect with you?
So 2 things I suggest. Number 1, LinkedIn, Ed Marsh. I'm the one with the American flag after my name, or my website, edmarshconsulting.com.
Awesome. Well, hey, I can't thank you enough for for joining us on this podcast episode. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully, lots of folks out there, are going to find a lot of value here. If you've listened to this episode and you like it, then please, like it, share it with your coworkers and your friends. We're looking to really kind of bring value and hopefully ideas and actionable items, to all sorts of different areas across the event and trade show, world. So thanks so much for joining us. We will go ahead and pack it in and say, hey, see you again here at the Toolbox next time. So thanks for coming, everybody.
Ed.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
me.
Ed.
You've got a long future ahead of you, Dana. You did a nice job on your first podcast.
Thank you.
She's awesome. She's a good get. All right, guys, take care. Thanks so much.